In the 29th verse of Psalm 107, it says, "He stilled the storm to a whisper and quieted the waves of the sea." In the Gardner Museum in Boston, there's a painting by the great painter Rembrandt, and it's called "The Storm on the Sea of Galilee." It is Rembrandt's interpretation of this biblical scene from the 4th chapter of St. Mark's Gospel. The painting shows panic etched on the faces of all the disciples as this small vessel in which they're sailing is tossed high in the air by the waves. 2 of the disciples are attempting to wake Jesus, who is asleep in the stern of the boat. And now, I don't know how you sleep through a storm like this, but Steve McNair assures me that when he wants to go to sleep, he can sleep anywhere. So if Steve can do it, surely Jesus can. But if you look more closely at the Rembrandt painting, something is wrong. And so you look closer and you begin to realize there are too many people in the boat. There are 12 disciples and Jesus, but there are 14 men. And so you go from face to face to face, and you realize Rembrandt has painted himself into the painting. Now, what he's saying by doing that is that you and I should do the same thing. We should see that we are in the same boat, the same storm, the same situation as those 14 men were so long ago out on the Sea of Galilee. And you know, all of us who've gone through the most recent storm here, we know what this is like. You know, you begin to get this feeling, am I going to get through this? Am I going to survive? We're all in the boat with Jesus, faithful but frightened. And that's the difference. We're in the boat with Jesus. Now, we hope that we have some kind of immunity. We hope that even though we're in the same fix, somehow we're going to get excluded. You can leave now. We keep hoping that somehow the storm will pass us by, or that our faith will never flee. But we keep hoping that we get an exception. Now, last week, we talked about how this 4th chapter of the Gospel of St. Mark is structured. It has one agricultural parable after another. And then the end of the chapter comes and you find this story of the calming of the storm. And what all of that was adding up to was that, you know, God increases the church in some kind of mysterious way, but God gives the increase. And we don't really have to worry about it so much because the guy helping us is God himself. It's God incarnate. It's Jesus who has power over the natural order. And that's really the point of the story of the calming of the sea, is that Jesus is really somebody extraordinary. But let's look at this in a little more detail. Now, we all understand that storms are scary places to be, and that if you're in a small boat off the Mississippi coast and you get caught in something, it could be really terrifying. Randy Santa Cruz told me a story one day about sailing out on the Bay of St. Louis with his daughter, Catherine, and he looked back, because Catherine was in the stern and he was closer to the bow, and he looked back and his eyes almost bugged out of his head because here was a waterspout about to overtake the two of them, and it did. And she never got to see it coming. It just was on them, and they got really wet. But you know, that's the way this storm happened today. It was they're out on the Sea of Galilee, and all of a sudden this storm is on them, and the waves are breaking over the boat, and it's nearly swamped, and yet Jesus is asleep in the stern. So they go and they wake him up because they're terrified. And they ask him, "Teacher, do you not care if we drown?" In the Revised Standard Version it said, "Do you not care if we perish?" As if there are other ways of dying than just drowning here. Like you could die of fear. Now what happens next is really dramatic. Jesus gets up, rebukes the wind, and says to the waves, "Be still, be quiet." And it is. And it is. The wind dies down completely, and it's completely calm. And he turns to his disciples and says, "Why are you so afraid? Have you no faith?" And then St. Mark makes this most interesting observation. He says, they were terrified and asked each other, "Who is this God that even the wind and the waves obey him?" And it doesn't really say what the disciples were terrified of. And so you begin to wonder, they're more afraid of Jesus than they are of the storm. Because here's this guy who's acting like God. He says a word and everything changes. I was in an airplane, 737 Southwest Airlines, flying into DFW one night through a thunderstorm, a North Texas thunderstorm. I hope never to do it again. And I looked over in the seat next to me, and there was this woman who'd never flown in an airplane before. And I didn't know what made me feel worse, that she was in this airplane with me, or that we were flying through this terrible storm. Because she was absolutely terrified. And I have to tell you, if she had suddenly said, "Be still," and it was, I would have been absolutely terrified. Who are you? And how do I get away from you? You know, and that's the kind of feeling these guys have today. Is you know, who is this guy that with a word, he's like God? And the whole natural order does what he wants. See, it's not just he makes things grow, but he makes the wind and the waves stop. Now, I wish I could tell you things get better for the disciples. It doesn't. Because now you have this second story that doesn't seem to be related to it at all. I mean, you look at this, okay, calming of the sea, healing of a demoniac. What do these things have to do with each other? Watch this. Watch this. Jesus and the disciples get back in the boat. I don't get that. I get off that plane. I ain't getting on it again. Leave me alone. I'm not flying through another thunderstorm. They get back in the boat, and they go back across the lake. And when they arrive on the other side, they are greeted by a man who is possessed by an evil spirit. No one could subdue him, not even with a chain. I mean, this guy, there's something really wrong with this guy. And when he sees Jesus, he runs and falls on his knees and shouts at the top of his voice, "What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God?" Now look, this is a crazy man. And you learn that he's possessed not by a demon, but by a legion of demons. A legion was like a division. Think 20,000 demons are in this guy. Okay? He is possessed by a legion. And who's speaking? Is it the crazy guy or is it the demons? And it's the demons. What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? The demons know who Jesus is. Because Jesus has a supernatural reality, and the demons know it.